The Georgia Bulldogs, who won the SEC last year, fell up a little bit short, lost to Notre Dame in the playoffs. Joe, when you look at Georgia coming into the 2025 season, how do you see this all playing out?
I know that a lot of people might assume that, Blake, you and I are Georgia Glazers. I think that a lot of people might think that we are. We make a lot of excuses for Georgia, and that might be true, but it's warranted considering the coaching staff, the depth, the recruiting, the success, the limited roster turnover, all of those things. I think that more people do need to be talking about Georgia coming into this upcoming season. I think as we always focus the beginning part of this conversation, we always look at like the key departures. They're not losing many premier players on defense. They're losing Jalen Walker. They're losing Michael Williams. They're losing Malachi Starks.
Well, that's some superior players now.
But, and we're going to get into talking about the roster, they've got a bunch of five-star dudes at a lot of these other positions that they're losing guys at that are going to step up. There is always a next man in waiting with these Georgia Bulldogs. But here's an angle that I want to take this first. They're losing 3 starting offensive linemen. Jared Wilson, Tate Ratledge, Dylan Fairchild. Those, in any circumstance, we would be talking about how 3 starters gone, this team is going to be in serious trouble. Mm-hmm. I think that those prospects are quality players. I do not think that they played cohesively well together last year. They did not play strong football, and it was a talking point that we had all season long that they were not protecting Carson Beck well enough for them to win at the level that they could have been winning at. I actually think that this shakeup and losing those 3 guys and just having a reset at offensive line with Ernest Green and Monroe Freeling coming back at tackles, that this team might actually end up getting better on their offensive line because they've recruited so well. So my big thing, Blake, before we really, really dig into this, I think that their roster turnover is the one that I am the least worried about, despite them losing a number of very, very big names.
Georgia does not rebuild, they reload. Everywhere.
Exactly.
Let's go to the offensive line first, because you brought it up. Xavier Truss, Tate Ratledge, Jared Wilson, and Dylan Fairchild gone. You do have Frayling, you do have Micah Morris, you do have Calhoun, you do have Merriweather, you do have Hewley. The big offensive line group that you recruited a couple of years ago, the 5 stars and highly recruited guys, now have to take a big step. Now, this is what I'd say. There's one pushback I would give you. You talked about cohesiveness. I understand that the unit for Georgia last year did not play with a lot of cohesiveness. I don't know if I can expect a lot of sophomores and some redshirted freshmen to give me the, elite cohesiveness either. I still think that we got to see how Georgia responds in that. I do agree with you in reference to the offensive line that, look, man, you just could not run the football last year, and it killed you. It flat out killed you. You got to be able, if you're Georgia, the way that you want to structure your team, the way that you want to be able to win games, if you do not run the football, you're not going to win. That is the bottom line. I don't care who the quarterback is. I don't care if it's Carson Beck, Stetson Bennett. I don't give a Rudy Poo. Based off of what they want to do, they have to run the football. Now, I do have a lot of faith, and I said this when we did our preseason stuff for them last year. I never worry about Kirby, and I'm not even going to worry about Kirby now when it comes to defense. I do worry about that offensive line, though. You got a lot of young talent, but cohesiveness is going to be a big thing. By the way, now you have 2 sophomore running backs that are there that showed a lot of promise, but had a lot of turnovers. Joe, and you're in all of that, you have a new starting quarterback. And I think that when we look at a team like Georgia and we look at a guy like Kirby, we don't worry because it's Kirby, nor should we. But there's still got to be questions that got to be answered along the offense. Joe was their biggest struggle last year. I mean, I don't expect them to turn the ball over as much as they did a season ago with Carson Beck. Clearly, you never go into a season doing that. I do think up front at quarterback and at running back that they have questions. They have shitloads of talent, but questions. 9 times out of 10, that talent will hit. And we've seen Kirby hit with that talent. So it's not like I'm hitting the panic button. I'm not saying it's DEFCON 1 or anywhere close to that. But we still got to see them perform. That's number one. Number two, you did bring in two very talented wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
That being Zachariah Branch and that being Noah Thomas. Joe, that screams to me that they want to open it up a little bit more. You don't go in there and get Noah Thomas and Zachariah Branch and not want to open it up a little bit more. Here's another problem that they had offensively. Joe, we put a lot on Carson Beck and the problems of Carson Beck from a year ago. Joe, I can remember literally Gunner Stockton against Notre Dame in a deep post route run by Dylan Bell and it being dropped, and that would have been a touchdown. They wind up punting the football. Here comes Notre Dame and Riley Leonard. They lose the game because of it, Joe. They got to get better play all around offensively. I do think, for what it's worth, I don't think that I've seen this offense under Kirby this bad since probably year one. I don't remember it being this bad ever. Even when Jake from State Farm came in, or even at times when early on in Kirby's tenure. But I'm not going to take 1 year of everything that he's done, meaning last year, and make that the norm. Mike Bobo's under a lot of pressure here, and so is this entire offense. Now, the big question, and I kind of wanted to just stay on offense earlier, the biggest question for me, Joe, who's going to be the quarterback? And let me ask you this. Do they go in the portal? Because quite frankly, I understand that you probably wouldn't, but at the same time, you might need depth, depth there. Is Ryan Puglisi, who everybody's high on, is he going to win the job? Or is it going to be Gunner Stockton? That will be the biggest question mark for me moving forward.
I feel like it's going to be Gunner Stockton because naturally they tend to, at Georgia, it seems like they tend to value experience. I know that Fromm stepped in and played as well as he did, which was unexpected as early on as he did, and he was tremendous. But I feel like Stockton being around and playing and finishing the season really well will give him the chance to start. But Puglisi has been hyped up a ton. You get excited seeing the clips. You hear from a lot of recruiting folks that think that Puglisi was a better guy to keep than Dylan Raiola because he's going to step up to the plate, all of those things. I think that what it'll end up being is Stockton starts, and if he doesn't play out to expectation or he struggles, then we start to see Puglisi step in. I have faith that Stockton could play well. I think that Stockton kind of having a little more Stetson Bennett in him, being mobile and willing to escape pressure, that helped Georgia a ton. Here's another part. We just talked about the offensive line. Hitting reset is good for them. If we talked about a team losing two starting receivers, we would be like, oh, shit. Yeah,
not
two
when
guys.
Receivers led the conference in drops, though.
Right. That statement alone, just losing two receivers is naturally an uh-oh moment. Mm-hmm. But for what you just brought up, when we add the context in, we go, oh, they need new guys. They need a complete reset.
And they got them.
Right. That's the biggest part with all of this is that they got a spark plug in Zachariah Branch, and they got a really quality possession player in Noah Thomas, who I feel like pretty confident that he's going to come down with the football. They now have more reliability at receiver. That is the largest jump for me this offseason heading into the season. Right. Is that last year we didn't spend enough time talking about concerns in the receiver room, and those guys did not play as well as we had hoped. They played way below expectation, and they could not hold on to the football. The fact that receiver was so effectively and aggressively addressed makes me feel a lot better about Georgia coming into the season, because 100 times out of 100, I don't need to worry about Georgia's defense. CJ Allen and KJ Bolden and Raylan Wilson and Dalen Everett, all those guys coming back, I think are going to do some tremendous things because they're all of the prototype of Georgia defenders that go on to be elite. But here we are, Blake, talking about them having a much more explosive option at offense. And if Stockton can just play clean football, I don't need him to win the Heisman. I just need him to not turn the ball over like Carson Beck did, and him to avoid a couple of sacks that Carson Beck was unable to avoid. There is a lot more potential here, I think.
Get that big neck turned in time.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me say this. I do think defensively, which we'll get to next, I do think that they reload. when you reload, sometimes it comes at a cost of early in the season giving up big plays. Always, it doesn't matter the team. It literally never matters the team. Joe, you have 9 players that you're replacing defensively. 9 out of 11. That's a shitload. They have recruited at such a high level that like I said a year ago, and Georgia was really good defensively. They were just on the field so damn much. Mm-hmm. By the Georgia Tech game, they were one slap out because their quarterback kept turning the ball over. There is something that's very interesting, though, that I want to bring into this offensive conversation. Kirby went to the podium last week and stated, and I'm paraphrasing, I want guys that care about football. He said that a year ago, I felt as if that not many people cared about football.
Is that directed at Carson Beck?
I don't know. Well, Carson Beck did say that he didn't watch football outside of football.
And he's also
he was taking a shot at his whole team because sure. I don't think Kirby cares about what Carson Beck did or didn't do. What I do think that he cares about is that I think he's preaching more about a culture issue than a player talent issue. I think that he has taken this offseason to say, see, you guys thought that you would walk your ass right into a national. He's Nick Saban their ass. He's learned from the best. You thought that y'all would walk in there and Notre Dame punched you in the mouth and there wasn't shit you could do about it. And I understand from a Georgia fan perspective. Context has got to go into that. It's Gunner Stockton's first start in the playoff game against a team that was close to winning a national title. Let's just be real here. I understand all of that. But don't act as if that Kirby Smart's not utilizing that to motivate during this offseason. Now, defensively, Stackhouse, Brinson, Williams, Walker, Munden, Chambliss, Starks, Jackson, you're replacing. And you know what? The 2 deep right now has got 5-star redshirted freshmen. So yes. I come back in here and say that what do you want me to say about Georgia? We can talk about every single player. We can go to our lads and talk about their depth chart if you want me to, and that's fine. But when I come in here and I say, no, they're going to reload there. It might take them some time, but they'll reload there. Joe, they got to be better offensively because I feel like defensively that they'll always just be fine under Kirby. That's just how I always feel and will always feel. They got to be more productive.
Right, and that's like, and I know I said a second ago that like I'm not feeling overly worried about what they're going to do on the defensive side of the ball. Like they're always going to find success. They have the ability to lean on their athletes and allow for those athletes to step up. There could be unexpected names that we don't even know of because of how well recruited they are that end up turning into premier players. I mean, great example, Jalen Carter wasn't even the highest recruited kid in his class, and he turns out to be a top 10 pick. He ends up being one of the best defensive tackles that we've had in college football in the last 20, 30 years. He was that good of a player. So there's just so much opportunity for their talent evaluation and their talent development to end up panning out and for what can happen for this upcoming season. Can we take a look at their schedule, though, and kind of dig into what we think is going to happen here?
Yes.
This is what they've got. I think that the schedule is easier than last year, but it's still incredibly hard. Versus Marshall, versus Austin Peay, at Tennessee. So they get Tennessee week 3 potentially, but at time of taping this, right. They could go to Tennessee with a completely new quarterback in his 3rd ever start. Bye week, they host Bama, huge advantage. Host Kentucky, big advantage because we know the craziness that happens when they travel to Kentucky. They go to Auburn. They get to host Ole Miss to get revenge from last year. They host Florida to not get revenge, but to to clean up against them at home. At Mississippi State, which is couldn't get an easier road game in the SEC. And then they host Texas. They host Charlotte. Last fold of this. They technically are away playing Georgia Tech, but it's at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome.
Mm-hmm.
So it is not, or no, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Sorry.
Right.
That's not a real road game. There are tough opponents, but there's not a lot of like true, like scary road environments outside of Auburn and Tennessee.
Well, Auburn's a big look, man. I'll just say this. People will laugh at me. They laugh at me all the time. Auburn's just a tough place to play. I don't care what any team that they have that they roll out there, especially if that game's at night. It's a trap game regardless. When I look at their schedule, Joe, I agree with you. It's easier last year. Remember, they were on the road to Bama. They were on the road at Ole Miss. They were on the road to Texas. That in and of itself is a hell of a feat. They finished with the number one strength of schedule in the country. They do have Georgia Tech in the neutral site, so, I mean, technically it is an away game. But, listen, I don't know if Alabama can go into Sanford Field and win. I don't know. I legitimately don't. Joe, the outright floor for them, again, for me, though, is 10-2. It's the outright floor. I mean, I don't know if I see 2 losses. Like, I guess I could see Alabama. I guess I could see Texas. Maybe Florida's better. And look, Ole Miss, for what it's worth, I mean, Austin Simmons might be a dude. But here's the problem with that. All of those games are at home. And I don't think that you lose 2 of them. I don't. I think maybe you lose one. Maybe you lose one. I'm high on Georgia this year. The reason I want to pause, though, is because when a coach is out there talking about culture, I don't care who it is. It's going to be interesting to see. The reason I want to say 10-2 here to some extent, I don't know if I have a lot of faith in Gunner Stockton yet. And so for that, if you got into a shootout, let's just say Alabama does get better offensively, and they do. One of these young quarterbacks does hit, and they do have weapons. Let's say you do have Arch Manning coming into town, and he does hit, and he does work, and they are dangerous. I don't know if I take Gunner Stockton winning a shootout. And I say a shootout, and before Georgia fans say, well, our defense is going to be good, we're not going to get in shootouts. You got in shootouts last year versus Alabama. You got in a shootout last year versus Georgia Tech. You got in a shootout last year in the rain against Ole Miss. Don't act like it won't happen to you now, because it will happen to you. Regardless of that, though, I cannot envision them going anything worse than 10-2. If they can go undefeated, maybe, I don't know. But, Joe, they're still replacing so much, and I just don't know if yet I can put my faith, if Gunner Stockton is the guy, that he can lead them to that. I don't know.
Gunner Stockton is certainly something that we can question and worry about. And then I think at the very least, in a battle against a premier quarterback in the conference, say Arch Manning ends up being the best quarterback in the conference, in a battle like that, probably doesn't win if he doesn't, if he's not as good as we're hoping. But at the very least, his play style has shown me that for the rest of the conference that he can do enough for them to win. So I agree with you. I think as long as Kirby is there, 10-2 is always going to be the floor. I don't see enough changing. And more importantly, we're talking about here the resets and them getting better in certain areas. Like, we didn't even talk about Carson Beck, the reset of like having moved on from him and not really there being any total bad blood there, that you just kind of get to try and see who else is next. And you've got 2 quality options. 10-2 makes a lot of sense for me. I see 11-1 certainly is a possibility as well if they're able to steal that game at Tennessee, and if they're able to win on the road at Auburn.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a challenging schedule. It will be interesting because I feel like in some aspects, though, we say this and we have worries, and Kirby's got us exactly where he wants us.
Exactly. Whenever we're not talking about them as much, as always ends up being when they're their best.
100%. All right. By the way, you don't necessarily have to put this in there. Did you see this thing with Texas A&M, by the way?
What? Oh, the Qatar thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to know what the hell they're doing, man. I don't.
Listen now.
I'm good. I am good.
We always thought of A&M as having some skeletons in the closet. Boy, this is a massive skeleton in the closet, if you do ask me.
Yeah. I've got no comment on that one, but I wouldn't be shocked if we didn't find out that there was some crazy money being thrown around. Let's leave it at that.
Did Jimbo's buyout money come from Al Qaeda?
That definitely didn't happen.
$2 billion. That's a lot of money now.
Well, I think a lot of it went to research, not NIL.
Research and meat judging. It's their last
Apparently.
national title.
Apparently, must be.
I'm so getting canceled. All right, we'll see y'all again.